Last year, I was feeling very lost in life, disappointed with my degree, when I suddenly was given a really big opportunity. I was given the opportunity to pursue a second degree on something I was really passionate about, and with a very discounted price. The only problem was my new college would be on the internet, and that meant no professors, only learning through books. So I took it as an opportunity to learn as much as I could on how to study and read effectively. And this is how I discovered active reading. Any good professional teacher will tell you that knowledge is not received. We don't get knowledge in the same way that the teacher can give us a gift or give us some money. It's not something that we receive, but something that we construct. So really, learning is making meaning of the world, aligning your point of view with that of reality so that you don't make mistakes. And we do it by really doing mistakes, approaching the reality, and getting hands-on experience. So deep learning and active reading is not much like going to a Christmas gift party and receiving a gift and putting it on a shelf of your mind. No, that's not like it. It's much more like receiving a lump of clay, something bare information, just words on a page, a mass of information that doesn't have any meaning and doesn't make any sense to you, because let's accept it, let's face it, we always suck when we're initially learning something, and that is what we get from a book. Just bare words on a page, bare information, something that doesn't have much meaning and that we cannot apply in reality. And the task of learning and active reading is getting all those words, all this mass of information, and transforming it into a sculpture, something that makes real meaning, in the same fashion as you cannot pay somebody to grow your muscles. You can pay a trainer, but you will have to do the work yourself. You will also have to do the work yourself when you're active reading. So let's get into it and let's see some tips and see a walkthrough of my regular way of approaching a book, learning it in depth. And for that, we'll be using the book Python for Everybody by Charles Severance. And why are we going to use this book? First, because of the license, so we can show it here on screen without getting any ban. And second, because it's a very introductory material, so I think you're going to grasp the general meaning of the things that I'm going to learn, so as not to overwhelm you with very technical vocabulary. I am also just a beginning in Python, in this programming language, and I'm really excited to give it a try. So let's get into it and let's open our webcam. So in this little walkthrough, we're going to use mainly two apps. The first is the web browser, where we have this book, which is open for everybody, and it's in this amazing website called Trinket. And next we've got our note-taking app, because if you really want to remember, you cannot trust your mind. You must think of something somewhere where you can store your thoughts to review later. Even the default iPhone or Windows note-taking app would suffice, but I use this amazing tool called Notion, which you might have heard of any other time. So, and here is, we've written the title of the book, the author, and I've written a walkthrough of the 5 key steps that we are going to use in order to read actively and effectively. So let's get down to it, and I would like to organize my things in a way that is more comfortable for our reading. And this, we're going to do it like that. I'm going to get it in a separate window, and I'm going to put the two windows side by side. We are doing it on a Mac, but it's really easy to do it on Windows too. And that's it. And now we can see on the left the book, and then our note-taking app on the right. Anybody would be persuaded to go and read all the book on a rush and take notes on everything, because everything is important. But this is because we don't truly understand what's going on, and we don't really understand, we cannot distinguish which information is the most important. So we're going to study very ineffectively if we just read everything at the first take. And we are also going to be a little bit exhausted as well, and feel like we are not really getting the grasp of the subject. which is a really disappointing feeling. So how are we going to approach it instead? So we're going to do a quick exploration. And by exploration, I mean looking at only the titles, only the very, very big things that resonate with us, just reading it, but reading it so fast that we can only see the main points and how the topic is structured. Because one thing we know for sure in the psychology of learning is that what we learn is much better remembered when it's structured, when it's organized around certain key points that are going to be our reference. So we're going to do this quick exploration, and mainly we're going to look at the titles, because most books, they are very well organized and the author already know what are the main topics around which to structure your thoughts, structure your mind, so that you're going to remember it. So we're just going to copy and paste the titles. And somebody might tell me, well, isn't it better to just write them yourself because you're going to remember them? You see, in many studies, and I'm going to leave some links on further research in the description, they've discovered that among the techniques that enhance your memory, really, just taking notes and writing what you see isn't a very effective tool. Then I'm going to explain what I'm going to do instead. So let's get down to it. Let's start with our first chapter. Well, not the first chapter. We are already on chapter 4, but it's going to be very, very easy. So a quick exploration. Let's get all these main titles. So first we're going to talk about functions. Function calls. How will we call a function? Let's see. And we're going to put all our titles here down below. Built-in functions. What are built-in functions? Now I've got a doubt, and I'm going to save this doubt for later because it's going to help me a lot in my process of learning about Python and the contents of this book. So now that we have all our titles, we still do not want to get down to reading and try to read all at once, because as I said, there is some information that is more important than other. How are we going to recognize what is most important to learn? By asking questions. We need to be curious, and as you remember from just a minute ago, I was really curious, for example, on how can I create a function on this language. A function is just a packet of instructions that tells the computer what to do, and maybe if you're going to repeat these instructions a lot, you might as well group them in a packet of instructions and just write the name of the function instead of writing all the instructions again and again and again, which would be very tedious for a programmer to do so. Because I know to do functions in other languages, I am really interested in how can I create a function in Python, in this new programming language. So I'm going to, now that we've got function calls, I'm going to write this question: how can I? Nicely done. Now, built-in functions and adding new functions. I'm really curious on what is the great, and I would also like to know random numbers, max functions. Yeah, I would really like to know where can I get a complete reference. So if there's a website where there are all the math functions available, because I might need them, and I know that maybe there are 100 functions and I cannot memorize everything, so I might as well be prepared for this situation. So what am I really doing when asking myself questions? What I'm doing is filling in the gaps. Not filling in the gaps, but recognizing the gaps in my knowledge so that I can focus my attention on those things. So now that I've added some questions to the whole reading experience, now I'm going to start with analytic reading. The meaning of this image of the dots. We've seen in the first image that there were some dots on the map, and exploring was like putting some dots on the key concepts or key themes of the book that we're going to read. And now we're going to connect the dots. Now that we know what are the main topics of what we are going to learn, we're going to see the connections between those topics. Now that we know the gaps in our knowledge, we are going to fill them more efficiently. So that is the importance of preparing our reading, as we have done. But I want to be very aware of my questions, I want to be very aware of the titles, and I want to find the key information, the information that is worth remembering. And this information, because as we said, it's not very effective to just type it and copy it, I'm just going to copy paste it. Because later, if you keep watching this video, you're going to discover what I'm going to do with this copy-paste information so that I can remember it very effective. So as I'm reading, I really want to detect, I want to find the key vocabulary. For example, we've got argument. This vocabulary, I'm not going to write the definition because I really want to remember it. So instead of taking my time to write the definition, I'm just going to leave it like this, and then we're going to see what we're going to do with all this information in order to truly remember. And I'm going to go through this part of the video quickly because it's just going to be me filling down the gaps of my memory and catching the vocabulary, the main vocabulary of the topic. So now that we've got all our information, we're going to remember it with active recall, which is a theory of learning which states that we are actually learn not by reading, not by taking notes, but by trying to remember the information. Yes, it's like a paradox, and we don't learn by the things, the information that we put into your mind, we put into our minds, but we actually learn from trying to retrieve this information from our minds, and it's one of the most effective ways of learning. And I'm going to add to this space repetition, which is the another theory of learning which states that we have to repeat things, to do it consistently in order to really learn a skill or learn a concept. Because, and when you start to think of it, it's just the contrary to what really happens when you're reading a book. You read it once, you find it very interesting, you take notes, but then it's not until a week before the exam, or luckily 2 days before the exam, that we get down to study and we think, well, I should have studied before. But it's not about studying 2 months ago, 2 months before the exam, or 2 months before you actually need it, but studying regularly or just using it in your daily life. And how are we going to do this? How are we going to prepare those notes so that we can do it like a game, like we are testing ourselves and have to retrieve this information instead of putting it into our minds, and also so that we're going to repeat it very often. So we're going to prepare our material, and let's see it with an example. So in built-in functions, I captured this information, this piece of information, which says that these two functions are useful to find the maximum value and the minimum value. So, but if I read it, it's not going to be, if I read it again, I mean, it's not going to be really effective to help me remember it, because as some studies have shown, links to them in the description and to other interesting videos on that topic, as some studies have shown, it's not a very effective way to learn. So what I want to do is to hide this information so as to force me to retrieve this information from my mind. So I'm going to do a toggle, which is something you can do in this app called Notion, in which I'm going to dedicate another tutorial more in depth. So anyway, I'm going to create I'm going to create a title, which is max and min functions, which is what I want to remember. What do they do? And then I'm going to, indent it and close it. Well, voila, it has disappeared. And what is going to happen when a day later I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to try to remember. I won't be able to see the answer, so I'll be forcing myself when I read it again to try and think, well, what did they do? What did these two functions called max and min, what do they do? And I'll be thinking, well, I think max is going to accept 2 or 3 numbers and output the biggest of them, and min will do the same but with the smallest. And when I checked later, it's going to, yes, well, they give us the largest and the smallest values in the list respectively. So it's going to be really interesting because it's going to be quite like a game, like testing myself, like if every rereading of my notes would be like an exam, which is one of the best and most effective ways of learning what you read. Another thing that I want to point out is that there were some things, like some questions, like the one in math functions, which I have colored in red because I didn't find the answer. So I shouldn't be satisfied with this result, and I should look for information on the internet, on a dictionary of all available functions, because this is really a gap in my mind that I want to fill because I'll be reading it. So we shouldn't take the book as the ultimate authority on the topic that we want to learn, but try always to explore more and try to overlearn. And finally, we go to the last step, which is hands-on practice. Well, before we go to hands-on practice, we've also talked about spaced repetition. Now that we have active recall, that we can practice by trying to retrieve information, we also need to do it every day. So how are we going to assure that we do it every day? I do it with a personal calendar that I have on my journal, and I also use Google Calendar. A very good way to schedule your repetition is just to create a new event, which is going to be called Study Chapter 4 Python for Everybody. So like a study plus the name of the book, and I'm going to review it. How you are going to schedule it? Are you going to do it in 1 week? Are you going to do it every day? Well, one of the most famous things in the theory of spaced repetition is the learning curve, which states that things that are really difficult to remember at the beginning, but once you start getting the grasp of the concept, you can leave a lot more time between repetitions. So at the beginning it might be every day, but once you feel very comfortable, just create an event for a month later or even 2 months, because it's going to be much easier once you've practiced for about a week. And now that we've solved the spaced repetition issue, now we're going to go to the last one, hands-on practice, because a lot of concepts are just that you have to memorize, but there are others that you cannot just learn it from doing a book, from reading a book. For example, now I can understand what is a function. I could be able to read code with a little bit of help from the internet, but would I be able to create a function? It's quite unlikely, because the knowledge that you learn from a book is much more theoretical. So how am I going to do this? What I'm going to do is create some projects, and these projects might be create an app with Python that uses functions of 2 kinds. And this would be a very nice project to really complete, because it would mean that I have truly understood this chapter and what it aimed to teach. But I'm not completely satisfied by this project, because it's not very practical. It's very theoretical. So in order to move it more practical, I would make because we've also talked about random numbers. So what practical thing can we do with random numbers? We're going to create a math game. So now that I know how to create random numbers and use them in my programs, now I can create a math game in which two random numbers appear, and I have to give the answers to, for example, the multiplication or the sum of these two numbers, and that would be a much more practical project, which is also much more effective. I don't only want to learn concepts, but I also want to learn when to use this concept, which is really important in order to really settle down your knowledge. If you truly feel that this video has added some value to your day, you might be wondering, how can I help Arnold Gee, this content creator who's so on the rise? I mean, 7 subscribers, like, I love you so much, this is too much for me. So if you found value in this video, the best thing that you can do to support this channel is give away your voice. And I really want to know in the comment section, what is the book that had the most impact in you in 2020, because right now I'm looking for books to read and even review in this YouTube channel, and I'd be really interested to hear your voice. And in the next week, I'll also be posting a lot on productivity, happiness, and living with a purpose. So if you're really interested in these things, feel free to subscribe and join me on the journey. So see you soon and have a nice and productive week.